Scarlet Witch Sigil, or Scarlet Witch, whatever you want to call her. It's a little bit of a problematic champion, especially if you're looking to get the character soon or in 6 months' time, which is the narrative that Kabam is spinning for this particular champion. But I wanted to do in this video a little bit of a dissection as to what other champions she's similar to. Is she groundbreaking enough for you to go, oh, I need, want, and desire this champion? I think that's the best thing to do. Scarlet Witch Sigil, in a nutshell, is unpredicted chaos, but at the same time, quick bursts of some light utility or quick to grab certain buffs or suppression. To really give you a kind of a pointer with that, it does really come in with the heavy attack and the block. So before the opponent lands an attack, while blocking, 50% chance to nullify one buff increased to 100% during the well-timed block window. So you essentially like shut down buffs very, very quickly. And as well, doing a heavy attack, you consume one instability to create a non-stacking power gain buff, generating 100% of a bar of power over 10 seconds. If you're familiar with Cosmic Ghost Rider, that kind of like playstyle of, I think it's ending with a light or whatever it is, you get a power gain buff and it's like boom, 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 quick power, and you're like, okay, this is great. It means you're able to get to specials a lot more quicker. And that's definitely handy in certain scenarios. I mean, look, if we go back to my Scarlet Witch Classic, can't believe we're calling it Classic, but there you go. The Classic version has more of a different narrative of getting certain things like buffs and triggering off stuff. We'll talk about the instability in a second with the Scarlet Witch Sigil. But the idea, if you do a crit, you get a buff, you get a positive effect, or you do a negative effect on the enemy. Those are just like things of like how that works. And in critical hits, 90% chance to nullify or remove one buff from the opponent. So again, like the old version has that very much kind of like quick suppression. The same thing that the Scarlet Witch Sigil has, quick suppression. I'm not going to click all the time, by the way, but it's like what I'm talking is like it's boom, instant. But at the same time, it's all about consistency here. And a lot of the times with Scarlet Witch, it's very much with both of them, it's like inconsistently consistent, but consistently chaotically brilliant at the same time. And that's the biggest problem with Chaos Surge. Chaos Surge, if you've got the unawakened version in particular, by the way, we'll talk about some of the awakened abilities in a minute, so what the signature ability gives. But it's all about a 20% chance for instability to gain one randomly selected buff, small chance to grant all buffs. Man, if you grant all those buffs, then it's going to be great. You got Fury, Cruelty, Armor Up. At least with the OG version, there's more of a, well, not overriding chance. It's just a case of like, a lot of times you see that the buffs coming up in rotation, and the smaller chance of getting something that's going to be the game-breaking narrative to this, like getting all those buffs at one given time, that is going to mean that you will be absolutely just destroying the enemy. I guess in some ways similar to the OG version. So it's kind of similar, but a lot of it is just very chance-based stuff, so it doesn't feel that fun. The real fun from Scarlet Witch Sigil, I think, comes from the SP2. Like, the SP2 is, it inflicts a random debuff. Duration is increased by 20% for each buff on either champion. So this could be really where the champion gets its kind of spark from. And that's sort of the problem and sort of a good thing in that it's randomized. Like, imagine going, I need a cold snap debuff for this particular interaction, or I need an incinerate or a poison for these vulnerabilities. Oh wait, I'm not getting it. It's randomized of one of the three. That's where it's kind of annoying, but kind of good, because you need something that's got a bit of crunch to the champion that's a bit different to the likes of Scarlet Witch. That's the classic version. You're never really kind of guaranteed to do debuffs, and having that poison pop off, it kind of like, it's very rare. So having something like here that at least you know you're getting a substantial enough debuff, and you know, you can see here, like, this is the 6-star version. That's substantial enough, and the duration is kind of important. Imagine if you were to get, for some reason, one of these buffs, or if you're able to get yourself anything like all of them at the same time, and then pop off an SP2, you can be guaranteed a huge amount of damage. So yeah. But it's still a case of, instead of it being 10 seconds, it would be, what, 20 seconds? So, yeah, slight increase, but it is what it is. So far, my feeling towards it is just, I'm still like, what is there really to this character that's not too similar to Scarlet Witch Classic? The idea that you get those unpredictability around your crits, and your crits do your damage, whether or not it's debuff stuff or whether or not it's going to be some damage output by the means of having cruelty and fury on, which are usually the greatest things about having the Scarlet Witch Classic. So again, like the SP2 seems to be the overriding interesting thing so far. But the SP3 is another thing entirely. That does add in a bit more. Nullify up to 5 buffs on the opponent. Each buff nullified this way increases the attack's attack rating by 1,362, depending on the rarity of the champion, and removes all instabilities, each inflicting a passive degeneration dealing 12,490 direct damage over 10 seconds. That is the interesting factor there. Yeah, you could say that the consistency around the nullification, the consistency on that being its well-timed block is probably one of the main things, but the damage side of things is the other thing as well. And those debuffs offered the SP2 and the SP3, which can be cycled pretty well from rotating around your heavy attack, but as well you do subject yourself to instability. You could do something like build up your instability, throw an SP2, then what you could do with that is build up instability, do the heavy attack, and then do the SP3, and have this really powerful rotation. And again, depending if you had all those buffs on at one given time, you could really stack up some numbers. That is, I think, where the interesting thing lies. The difference with Scarlet Witch, the classic version, is it's all about just being aggressive. So here's a good example here. We're going to be as aggressive as possible. We've got the weakness there because we've got a crit, and keeping it up. But, oh, we've got a stun, we've got a regeneration. But then it could be like times, we've got 2 regenerations. Again, with all this being like RNG, sometimes things don't go as well as you might hope. And even though we've got, like, you know, crit there, crit everywhere, sometimes it's not always guaranteed. And sometimes champion overshoots on specials, so building up that power can mean, like, I personally love rotating around the SP2. I think it's a bit more effective and you see a lot more of the big yellow numbers. But sometimes when things go, as I said, don't go too well, or they go well, you can have different things. Like you can go through a whole fight and not have any regen buffs whatsoever. You can have a fury, a cruelty, you can have maybe even 2 or 3 other cruelties at the same time. It is surprising what happens. But then you can go through instances like this where it's just a slow build up and nothing much happens. We're 50 hits deep and we should be crunching off, I would hope, a larger amount of numbers. But it's just the same thing. Like now we're ticking off some good numbers. Now we've got a little bit of cruelty. And if I spike off the SP2 there, we get a 30 odd K. So then sometimes you kind of think, oh, this is great. I'm being aggressive. I'm motoring now. This is really, really effective. And other times you're there like, oh, right, okay, so this is taking its time. We've got 2 Furies up there. We're going to shoot off the SP2 there. 37k there. Nice. So we've seen the RNG nature to the classic version. So how is there any kind of value to Scarlet Witch Sigil? There is and it isn't. The biggest problem is playing aggressively in quick rotations. Similar to the classic version. You will need to throw specials or do other means to get the instabilities. Those instabilities will be like a mini currency for either doing more debuff damage with the SP3 or debuff in general if you decide to build past 6, and also absorbing those instabilities and things like the heavy attack to build things like power gain and also SP2s, which gives you more of a chance to build a randomly selected buff because it's 20%, but it's 20% chance per instability. So you could kind of, I don't know if again it's down to this other thing where it's 20% chance on one instability, or is it a case if you have 5 instabilities, you create 100% chance? Kabam's logic with that is never very clear of how they're kind of processing that. But the point remains on this. This champion does have potential, but it's definitely based on those instabilities. Are you going to indeed do a build up through throwing special attacks and get a heavy attack, throw that, get the power gain, throw another special attack, special, and then it's a case of building to that SP3 with enough of those instabilities on, and per instability inflict the passive degeneration dealing 12,490 damage, depending on rarity, by the way, that's the other thing. So there is scope for this champion to be played well enough to do an extensive amount of damage. So that's going to be the thing, isn't it? That is going to be the real thing about this. How good this champion can be in the particular fights that you're going to take her into. That's going to be the crazy thing. Because she has got some other stuff to her, signature ability wise. So that's going to be on screen now. And that's not, we can't see that on here, but this is here. So there's a percentage chance when going against Cosmic Mystic Tech champions, which is chance per instability to inflict a petrify or armor break debuff for 2 seconds. Depending on that. If it's 100% at the point of full awakening, that would be cool. But also against Cosmic, Mutant and Skill opponents, there's a chance for instability to inflict a Power Sting or Heal Block debuff for 2 seconds. But that's a problem as well, because those instabilities are kind of like your currency. So if those instabilities are being used, or not like one per fight, you are forced to use instabilities in that way. So the awakened ability might not actually be that good. You may not want to awaken your Scarlet Witch Sigil. It's a weird point, but it's there. Because you might want to absorb it into doing that SP3. But there's going to be some pairings that are going to be good for it. So I think that's the biggest problem. The build of instabilities, what the awakened ability would sucker you into doing, but then there's other stuff with this. So Petrify, as we know, reduces regeneration rate and power. Armor break, yep, we know what that does. And Power Sting, which that's good to have. And Heal Block, stopping all healing effects. So there's some advantages there. But again, it just goes back to what I was saying about the instabilities feeling forced to be spent in a certain way if awakened. So you might want to keep this champion unawakened. This thing gets to this point that I kind of feel like this Scarlet Witch Sigil is, say, the current meta for how Scarlet Witch OG, so the classic version, was back in the old meta. How it's kind of like properly kind of like explain that. So back in the day, there was nothing like an extensive amount of buffs. It was just like the normal buffs, and also there was the normal debuffs. And then it's a case that as champions have evolved and new champions have been added since 2015, let's say, between 2015 and 2020, things have changed to be more of an emphasis of like the Petrify debuff coming in. Champions have either more regen than normal, they require to be armor broken, they require to be power stung, they require to have champions as well have been required to either do degens or non-degens, because most of the time there's either degen immunity or there's suppression, there's shrugging off, which has been a recent thing. So having a champion that kind of interacts with things like stopping healing effects, definitely has some of the old, but also has something of the new, especially again if we're considering the idea of we are spending those instabilities like a microcurrency within. It's like as well like any building champion in Marvel Contest of Champions, you've got to build up Warlock to do his heal blocking or heal suppression. You've got to build up Aegon through his combos in order to do something. So it's like the old and the new meet together, if you get my drift. So there is something of value with this champion, but I do think that the way that it's got to be played may not sit well with a lot of players. But at the same time, I'm interested in those instabilities. I'm interested with keeping them consistent, and I'm interested with throwing that SP3. What I'm not interested with is a signature ability where you awaken a champion and have to have forced your instabilities to be spent on things like Petrify or Power Sting, which looks like it's Heal Block, and Armor Break, which it looks like that's a forced narrative. But, as I said, it's like the classic meets the new kind of style of delivery. I'm interested for it down the line, but I don't know if it's going to be as game-breaking as many people kind of like feel that the Summoner Sigil has got this kind of advantage to get the characters. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think this champion is going to be one of those game-breaking champions? Put it in the comment section down below. Be interested to see what people feel about it. More details on the champion can be found in the link in the description. MCC Journal. There's also a video as well, which I'll probably put some clips over the top of this one, or have put some clips over the top of it. So yeah, go and check it out. Links in the description. Bye bye for now.